In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was the breath of creation. And this breath was the holy breath of love, and it moved over the face of the void. And from this, all the myriad varieties of creation as we know it came into being. This same story is told again and again, using different imagery by all of the old mystery schools and religions. The foundation of all that is love. Everything in the universe is birthed from love. This song of love sounds throughout all of the worlds, and like a homing beacon to our soul, it invites us back home, helping us to remember that the very fabric of the universe, of who we are, woven into everything, is love. And we do remember. We remember this in our deepest soul. But in this manifest world, this world of dense matter and our limited senses, we struggle to retain the perfection of that knowing. We do remember, but imperfectly. Love is the great obsession of our culture. We sing songs to it. We write poems and stories about it. We tell epics of heroes driven to the ends of the earth by love. We sigh over it, we yearn for it, and we mourn for it. And yet, the love of which we speak, to which we aspire, is at best imperfect. It's a pale reflection of the great love that birthed creation. And this is what Shakespeare is reminding us of in A Midsummer Nights Dream. It's a tale about love, but not a love that is strong and stable and unchanging, that does not alter when it alteration finds, nor bends with the remover to remove, as we're told in the sonnets. No, it's a very human kind of love, frail and changeable, and likened to madness. The author of the play is asking us to examine what we think we know about love, what we mean when we use the word, and tries to bring us to a better understanding of it. This is a play that's seemingly all about love, but he points us to the follies of love and the inconsistencies and delusions of love, its blindness and its fantasies. But we also see the redemptive qualities hinted at, if we can only see, feel, know love clearly. It has the power to transform us. But first we have to beware of the illusions, the high-flown fantasies and the hyperbolic excesses, the capriciousness and irrationality that those who claim to be in love are prone to. This is a very different kind of love to that which birthed all creation. That is immensely strong and stable, powerful, compassionate, allowing and all-encompassing. And this is the challenge that the author is laying out for those of us who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Helena says, love looks not with the eye, but with the mind. But we see no signs of this in the play. Constantly it is the senses that dominate. Love looks with the eyes, and as a result, foolish behaviours ensue. It doesn't look with the mind, nor does it look with the heart, which is quite an oversight when this is supposed to be the primary organ of love, and Helena doesn't even mention it. A simple love juice applied to the eyes makes all of the lover's heartfelt promises instantly void, as allegiances are swapped and then swapped again. It makes Lysander, on awakening and spying Helena, instantly drop his passion for Hermia, deluding himself that his only sweet reason to do so. The will of a man is by his reason swayed, and reason says, you are the worthier maid. Is this the love that birthed creation? And the levels of illusion and delusion deepen when Titania, a powerful denizen of the fairy world, also succumbs to the unreason of this type of love by being made to fall in love with a monster. Disregarding the reality of what is in front of her eyes, she adores an image, an illusion. She trusts her senses and then lead her into folly. Love as we humans understand it is a madness, or a midsummer madness, the author is telling us. To be in love is to be in this emotionally charged but ephemeral condition, prone to fits and starts, to fancies and overblown imaginings, to be divorced from reality and to fall victim to our untrustworthy senses. For love, Hermia disobeys her father. For love, Lysander takes Hermia away from her family and exposes her to danger. For love, Helena betrays her friend. And for love, Titania makes love to a monster. And over all of this presides Oberon, a magical and manipulative master of ceremonies. He shows compassion to Helena, trying to relieve her of the agony of unrequited love, but plays what is quite a deeply nasty trick on his mate in order to bring her to heel. Is any of this really love? And as if to emphasise that love is a kind of madness, time and again we have the imagery of the moon, as if to underline this point. Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon Juliet pleads in Romeo and Juliet. And rightly so, it's linked to inconstancy, to the world of shadows and night. It's easy, it would appear, to lose one's way in the moonlight, and this is alluded to time and again. Lysander has wooed and won Hermia by moonlight against her father's wishes. The four lovers enter the moonlit wood. The workmen plan to meet in the wood by moonlight. Oberon and Titania are ill met by moonlight, and so it goes. And there is a deliberate play on this. In esoteric lore, the moon is reflective of the solar energy. It is a pale reflection of the Creator's light, just as the lover's understanding of love is a pale reflection of love with a capital L. Its metal is silver, its stone the moonstone of feldspar, whose structure bends light, giving it a shimmering quality. Its element is water associated with the emotions, and its waxing and waning connects it to cycles, particularly women's cycles and women's mysteries. It's also connected to the imagination, to intuition and psychic senses, to prophecy and cleansing and magic and spirituality. All very helpful to one of the messages the playwright's trying to give us. But he's also warning us of its negative aspects, to an excess of imagination, to illusion and delusion, and fears and shadows and distortion and fantasy and bewilderment, disorientation, confusion, deception, and false ideas. So the moon rules the landscape of this dream, which takes place in an Athenian wood. Shakespeare constantly draws on this imagery of the moon, and yet a very careful reading of the text brings us to the realization that things are actually not quite what they seem. In fact, there is very little moonlight, if any, to be had at this time. Theseus says, 4 happy days bring in another moon, but oh, methinks how slow the old moon wanes. And he counsels Hermia to agree to her father's wishes to marry Demetrius by the next new moon, 4 days hence, or die for her disobedience. We are, in fact, approaching the dark of the moon, a time when the moon hides her face, the time of Hecate, the dark goddess, a time when the negative effects of the moon are much more likely to be felt. And above all, the moon is symbolic of the deep well of the unconscious and all that resides there, and it's mankind's task to make conscious what is unconscious within us, little by little. The lovers, when they wake from their dream, are unsure of the reality or unreality of what has passed. This uncertainty in itself is a good sign that something of benefit will come from their adventure. Has Hecate been working her magic deep within them? Who knows? Imagination plays a key role in the play, as Peter has said. We, the audience, have to exercise ours when watching the play, which is quintessentially English, although it's actually taking place in an Athenian wood. We also have to embrace the seemingly imaginal world of fairy. In the mystery schools, one of the most important teachings was the development of the imaginative faculty. not to be prone to the flights of fancy that we see with the lovers, but to develop and hone it into a well-developed and reliable sense, a muscle, a toned muscle, to enable us to use it as an access to other dimensions, to other states of being. This is how we develop the faculty of inner sight and gain access to experience of the metaphysical, which is literally beyond the physical. Our five senses don't serve us here. In fact, they hamper us as they keep us bound to this material plane. Imagination is a tool to change consciousness, and most of us have been taught to actively distrust this. We're told it's just your imagination, denigrating it and invalidating our own inner perceptions. And yet this is probably the most powerful tool that we have to change our reality, and the ancients knew this. The author is gently mocking this distrust we are taught of the imagination, and very quietly encouraging us to have faith in it, an essential skill for any spiritual aspirant. From the Hermetic perspective, there's a focus on the central role of the imagination. Duke Theseus prides himself on being a man of reason, a man for whom everything can be explained and calculated by what he calls cool reason. Not unsurprisingly, the lover's story stretches his credulity to the breaking point. How on earth has such harmony been achieved when there was only disharmony only a few hours beforehand? As a man of cool reason, there has to be a logical explanation. The intervention of magical or supernatural forces is well outside the ability of his psyche to cope with. And this is where the audience can have a silent chuckle at Theseus' expense. They know that he is totally missing the mark because of his inability to conceive of anything beyond the logical and rational. As the author tells us in Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that are dreamt of in thy philosophy. In Midsummer Nights Dream, we, the audience, know what the men of cool reason and logic refuse to acknowledge, that there is more, much more to the world than just the five senses. We've seen the fairies dance. We've seen miracles happen. And if the play is well done, we've been caught up in the magic net that's been woven around us. The men of logic and learning and intellect may think that they know the world with their core reason, but we know, in the true meaning of that word, gnosis, the inner knowing, we know that there is more going on than they can even begin to dream of. The author is very nicely puncturing the egos of the intellectual elite who think they have it all figured out. Yet despite this, it's Duke Theseus who presents a little dissertation on the imagination. Lovers and madmen, he says, have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. And he goes on to speak some beautiful lines that are deeply metaphysical. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is the madman. The lover, all as frantic, sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. For those in the know in Shakespeare's time in certain circles, they would have been aware that this closely parallels part of the Chaldean oracles, part of the Hermetic teachings introduced into the West through the court of Cosimo de Medici and interpreted by Gemistos Platon. These are originally attributed to Zoroaster and were held in high esteem by both the early church fathers and the Platonists. Incomplete, they're somewhat terse and somewhat enigmatic utterances, and they were believed to enshrine a very profound system of mystical philosophy, and also linked into the Kabbalah and Egyptian theologies, showing that they had common origins. According to the Chaldean teachings, man is composed of three souls, First, the intelligible or divine soul. Second, the intellect or rational soul. And third, the irrational or passional soul. It's thought that both Pythagoras and then Plato took this and developed this understanding into what is now called Plato's tripartite theory of soul. Man's psyche or soul is composed of three parts: logical, spirited, and appetitive. The logical is the thinking part of the soul. It's ruled by reason and it loves truth and seeks to learn it. It judges what is true and false and wisely makes choices in accordance with its love for goodness. The spirited is ruled by emotions and is the part by which we get angry, lose our temper, but also seek honour and virtue. In the just man, it aligns with the logical part and resists the desires of the appetitive and has the courage to seek to be good. In the unjust man, it aligns with the desires of the appetitive and indulges in the demands, the pleasures of the body. The appetitive is the part of the soul which is ruled by our animal appetites and experiences carnal, erotic desires, hunger, thirst, greed, and so on, and seeks to indulge itself. When the spirited part of the soul only listens to the appetitive and resists the logical, chaos ensues. Theseus talks of the lunatic, the lover, and the poet, equating to the appetitive or irrational soul, the spirited or rational soul, and the logical or divine soul. And that leads me nicely on to bottom. Bottom represents unevolved man. Man in his base state, where the faculty of imagination and inner sight and knowing hasn't even begun to be nurtured. Indeed, so underdeveloped is this sense that not just bottom, but all of the other mechanicals as well are really concerned that their audience is actually going to find their script too realistic. They're worried that the audience won't be able to suspend its disbelief and use its imagination to know that Bottom, as Pyramus, doesn't really kill himself, and that Snug really isn't a lion, and therefore they shouldn't be frightened of him, and so on. So to any theatre-going audience, this is really risible and is very naive to think that they're going to be unable to tell the difference between theatrical illusion and reality. But Bottom and his mates are very literal-minded chaps, and they think that everybody else is the same as them too. Indeed, Bottom has been wooed and pleasured by the Queen of the Fairies and her attendants, and is quite remarkably unchanged by the whole experience. As the fairies await upon his every pleasure, he's totally oblivious to the extraordinary circumstances in which he finds himself, and takes it all prosaically in his stride. He is a magnificent buffoon, whose lack of self-understanding makes him an egocentric oaf, who muddles up his words, boasts of being capable of taking on every role, is subject to flattery, and totally lacks any form of self-awareness. But it's left up to Bottom, complete with ass's head, to speak truth when it comes to love. Titania says, "Mine eye is so enthralled to thy shape, and thy fair virtues perforce doth move me on the first view, to swear I love thee." And Bottom's reply sums up the play's approach to this midsummer madness of love. "Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. And yet, to say the truth, reason and love keep little company together nowadays. Never a truer word was spoken, but it takes an ass to do it." And finally, we can't look at this play without mentioning fairies. Are these figments of our imagination, or are they other dimensional beings who slip through the veil of the worlds? Or do they reside here in this world alongside us, for the most part unseen by our rational, conditioned senses? The author seems to view them as being likened to nature spirits. In this magical, tiny world, the inhabitants tend to nature and the natural world. They're responsible for keeping nature in balance, for tending to its beauty, to each drop of dew, every petal and every leaf. It is a world of natural beauty and magic, but also of great joy and song and dancing. There is palpable delight in their guardianship of nature. But this world of natural beauty is in turmoil because the fairy king and queen are at odds over a changeling boy. The discord and disharmony of these nature spirits are affecting this world. For this cosmic disturbance, Titania holds Oberon responsible, and he, in turn, holds her responsible. This discord between the fairy king and queen affects us all. We all suffer when the balance of the harmony of nature is overset. These nature spirits affect us, and in our turn, we also affect them. And we can see today how this plays out as we slowly poison and destroy the natural world, and in turn poison and destroy ourselves. There is a madness, a sort of cosmic disturbance at play today that is not just altering the seasons but wreaking havoc all around us. Now, much of the lore concerning fairies came from the Celtic countries, although the first mention of them is actually in Homer's Iliad, where they're referred to as nature spirits or demigods. According to legends, fairies are the remnants of the Shea, the Tuatha De Danann, the children of the great goddess Danu. Once mighty gods and goddesses in their own right, it was foretold that there would come a time when there was no more virtue left in the world, and the children of Danu, the Shea, were driven underground into the hills, ignored and deserted by mankind whom they had sought to nourish. They've taken their earth magic and their dancing and their riches through the veil, and we are all the poorer for it. And they are now known as the fairy folk, the little people, the hidden people. As spiritual entities, they're considered to be supernatural or metaphysical beings with magical powers who live in proximity to the human world. They rarely show themselves, but even today there are still sightings, and behind the scenes they are still there, watching and waiting for man to fully wake up from the dream and to see the world as it really is. Thank you.